and welcome to Retro Warriors episode 300.
Whoa!
Woo! We
What?
did it. We did it 300 times. That's our legally obligated amount of shows. We never have to do it again.
All right, goodbye.
As always, I'm your host, Justin Baker, and as always, I'm joined by resident old bastard Chris Saturn.
Hello.
Although after 300 episodes, I think I'm also an old bastard at this point.
Yeah, we're just about 6 years in now, and I'm barely 6 years older than you, so.
Yeah, so I'm your age when we started the show.
Just about. So we started the show 6 years ago, so I would have been 32.
Yeah, I'm 32.
There you go.
Yeah,
you're officially an old bastard.
I made it. We had to do this 300 times, but I'm also an old bastard.
Yeah.
No real housekeeping this episode. If things are a little weird, it's because we're having some weird times in our lives, so please excuse us. Also, it's a weird episode.
Yeah, but hey, it's 300. If you want some housekeeping, we've got Cinema Rogues, we've got Board Game Barbarians.
Yes.
We usually mention at the end of the episode, but we could mention now, we have a Patreon where you get bonus content.
Yeah, and a Redbubble. If these 300 plus episodes we've done have provided any value to you,
right,
then you can purchase some merchandise or kick us a few dollars on Patreon.
Yeah,
we would appreciate it. Anyway, I feel, I will say as far as housekeeping, our other 100 episodes, we did big things.
Yeah.
We didn't do that this time.
Well, we kind of did.
It kind of ended up being a big thing, but I think we did big multi-part episodes.
True,
and I think we decided that we like it better when it's just a regular episode.
Right.
So we're just going to do it.
There's less stress, and we're better.
Pressure.
We're better at just doing a regular episode than we are at doing some grandiose thing.
So we're going to pretend like this isn't super special, but it is.
Yeah, it's so special.
Yeah. Anyway, my week,
yes, sir.
I picked up Loop Hero.
I was hearing about that the other day.
It is, I remember I saw it on the Humble store, and I laughed at it because I was like, that's the most generic fucking sounding name I've ever heard for a roguelike. No one is going to buy that. And then everyone was like, oh my God, Loop Hero is amazing. And I was like, oh, I still think the name is stupid, but the game is very fun.
I see when I first heard the name before I knew what kind of game it was, I assumed it was a Guitar Hero knockoff, but with hula hoops.
It's not really, I want that now. It's not really, I don't know that I would call it a roguelike. It feels more like if someone took a God game and made it an arcade game. So basically the premise is the gameplay, you get a loop, a trail. And the entire world has been like obliterated, and you're rebuilding it one tile at a time. And you have a hero that is going in circles on this trail. That's the loop. The hero's the hero. Loop hero.
Nice.
And as they're going, they run into enemies, and they automatically fight them. And enemies. They run into sea anemones, and they automatically fight them.
Perfect.
And you have no control over the battle whatsoever.
Yeah.
But as you destroy enemies, you get new gear. So on the right side of your screen, you're always equipping new gear to your person. And trying to be like, oh, I want to do like lots of, health regeneration or high defense, or, you're making your little, you get the satisfaction of like building a character.
Right.
And then as it goes, you're getting cards at the bottom of your screen, but it's not a card game. They just show up as little cards.
That's good.
And they create tiles on the screen. So you're building little like villages and monster spawn points and stuff like that your character is looping through.
Neat.
So your character gets stronger as they get more gear, and you're basically building not a dungeon, but building like this overworld they're battling in circles through, and it's actually really fun. And the gist of the game is you want to exit at a point that is beneficial to you, so you can take the most resources with you to rebuild the kind of legacy component of the game, because it does unlock stuff over time, as newer roguelikes do. They don't just ditch all your progress. And if you die in the progress, or die while you're in the loop, you don't get your stuff.
Gotcha.
So it's just kind of this weird God game with RPG building mechanics, but no real RPG gameplay on top of it.
Weird.
It's very weird. It's very fun. It's a good kind of like I'm watching a YouTube video in the background while clicking on this thing kind of game. If that makes sense, if you're ever just looking for something where you're like, I just have Star Trek on, but I just want to click something.
I want to feel like I'm doing something while I'm learning more about Riker's beard.
Yeah, I've also been getting back into Caves of Cud, which is just, man, that's just a fun, weird roguelike.
That one does not sound as interesting to me as the first one.
No, I don't think you would enjoy that one whatsoever. Caves of Cut is very traditional roguelike.
Yeah, I've heard it's very chunky.
It's very much like old school roguelike style design. And if you like that, it's one of the best. If you don't, stay away. Loop Hero, like I said, I feel weird even calling Loop Hero a roguelike because I'd never engage in combat. The character on my screen does it, and I have no control over it. Nice. So I don't.
That part specifically appeals to me for some reason.
Yeah, and granted, I like that. I like games wherein I kind of build up a thing and then watch the game play itself. Right. I enjoy that. Yeah. But yeah, it feels weird calling it a roguelike. It just kind of seems like any game that when you die, you lose some kind of progress gets called a roguelike these days.
How many hula hoops are in the game, though?
So far, none, but I'm hopeful that one unlocks it at some point. But that's about it. I started Star Trek Voyager.
Oh, yeah?
That's a thing I did. I've never seen it in my life. I watched
the early
all
seasons
of Next Generation.
The early seasons are especially rough because Neelix and Kes are the worst characters in all of Star Trek history.
You think so? I kind of like them.
Oh.
Neelix isn't as annoying as Troy's mom, so that's
true,
already...
But she also wasn't in every episode of that series.
I don't know. I'm okay with him. Kes, I'm kind of okay with too. Yeah. You know, she has some connection thing with the Doctor, who is gonna get a name. Apparently, that's how far I am. To tell you how early in the show, I'm like 5 episodes in.
I love the Doctor. He is the best character in that series.
I've been enjoying. I know now this is not even video game related, but it's episode 300. I'm gonna do what I want.
Yep.
I've earned it. It feels tonally, it's so different from Next Generation that I'm struggling with it.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I love Janeway.
It took me some time to appreciate her, but I actually do start to like her as the series goes on.
I just feel like Picard had this big theme for him was the needs of the many, right? And she feels like she's constantly putting the many on the line for the needs of the few. Just constantly.
Yeah.
No, doesn't consult anybody. It's just like, slam the ship into that fucking meteor. Why not? And they're like, Captain, but all the people. And she's like, well, when you're a captain, you got to be dumb. And then just does it, you know?
Yeah, that's fair. I feel like the writing for Trek during that era got progressively worse as you went forward.
It is weird that every fucking episode has them getting teleported somewhere.
Yeah.
Just every episode, it's like, oh, there's some kind of rift in something, and we've gone through the rift, and now we've gone through space and or time. And we'll do it again next week.
Captain, there's another rift. What will we do? Fly into it.
And I will say that Neelix was the only voice of reason in like episode 4 or 5. He's like, the captain's always flying us into things. Like, is there any space anomalies anywhere we can go fly the ship into? And I'm like, yes, thank you. Someone finally makes fucking sense. Because they're not on a science mission. No. They're fucking lost
they're trying
in the
to get
Delta
home.
Quadrant.
Yeah,
like, motherfucker, like, the Enterprise at least makes sense. Right. I know I'm just literally yelling on the internet about Star Trek now. I could not get more stereotypical internet nerd, but listen. The Enterprise, it at least makes sense that they're going into every anomaly. That's their mission.
Well, I'm guessing that her logic is maybe this anomaly will somehow get us home.
That's not what? That's like saying, oh, I lost my keys. I'm gonna go stick my hand into every dark corner I find to see if I find my keys.
Exactly. That's the premise of Voyager early on.
And it's like, dude, I don't know. So like, it doesn't make sense that they're doing most of this shit.
Right.
And he was the only voice of reason that was like, what are you fucking doing? Stop.
By the end of the first season, I really hated those two characters. And it's been long enough that maybe I would see it differently than I did when I was a teenager. But man, I did not care. The rest of the show, I was slowly building an appreciation for, but I hated those two. And then a few years in, when they introduced more characters and everything, I started to appreciate more of the cast dynamic, but it never reaches even close to Next Gen levels.
I don't love B'Elanna.
Yeah, it took me a while to appreciate her.
Her early arc was just like, I'm a great engineer, but fuck you. And it's like,
right.
in personally in my life, when people have that attitude, I'm like, okay, fuck me. Bye.
Right.
Like, you know.
I do appreciate Tuvok. But
I
mostly,
like Tuvok a lot.
But mostly because I still associate him with his character from Spaceballs. And that makes it better to
oh
me.
my God. I never even...
Yeah.
He is in Spaceballs. He's
Yeah.
the dude.
Yeah, he's the one that's combing the desert.
Yeah. We ain't found shit.
That's him. There's an episode, without spoiling anything of Voyager, there's an episode of Voyager where there's a dream sequence where he has to walk naked in the bridge.
Yeah.
And everybody just like stares at him in shock. And it's because Tim Russ, the actor, convinced the props department to make him like a 4-foot novelty penis. And it's just dragging on the floor behind him as he's walking. Yeah. And that's just some random Voyager trivia for you there.
Voyager's definitely a more fun show. Yeah. They're having fun. Right. There's a lot more fun to be had. I do also find the crew dynamic to be really interesting because in Enterprise, like, they were all friends basically from the beginning.
Right.
You know, in Voyager, it's basically a ship full of people that fucking don't like each other.
Right.
And it's been interesting. Anyway, I've just yelled about Star Trek for 10 minutes. Welcome to episode 300. Woo! We don't fucking know. We did 300 of them. We're just talking about Star Trek and smartwatches. Saturday time about smartwatch.
300 episodes in. Let's figure out how this pacing thing works. No, I got my fancy smartwatch this week. It's a Wise. Yeah. It was $20. It doesn't do a ton. It doesn't connect to the internet or anything. It only connects to my phone, which...
Good.
Like reading stuff online, I keep seeing people that are talking about how bad that is and how it detracts from the phone or the watch. I fucking love it. I love that it does not connect to the internet. It only
Why do you need your watch to connect to the internet?
Right? Like people are saying, well, if you then you can use it to make calls even if your phone isn't in range or whatever. I'm like, no, I don't need any of that. I just want it to tell me the time and occasionally if I get a text message. And of course, it also does other things like track steps and tries to simulate
people who
and whatnot.
Want to make phone calls on a watch have never made a phone call on a watch. I have and have been present for many. Please don't answer your watch phone. Just let it ring.
If anybody is going to take a call on their watch, it's Inspector Gadget. No one else needs to be doing that after the 80s. But anyway.
Fucking love Inspector. And I'll say this: Inspector Gadget still holds up. I watched some. It's good.
Well, that's because Don Adams is brilliant. He's a brilliant comedian, and he brought a ton to that.
Now I don't know if Matthew Broderick and French Stewart hold up.
No, I did not watch
as Inspector
any of those.
Gadgets.
I only watched the cartoon.
Yeah. Anyway.
Also, I got in my RGB SCART cables for my Genesis.
Yeah.
And
how are those?
And it's nice. It looks great. It still makes the same fart noise that the Genesis makes with any other cable combination.
Oh, that's just what Genesis music sounds like.
Well, no, not just the music, but like if it's on a black screen, you'll hear that.
Yeah. That could be your AC adapter.
It could be. I've used a couple of different AC adapters, including this new one that I have that's a multi-AC adapter that will connect to the Genesis and the Sega CD and the 32X all with one adapter.
Yeah.
And it still makes that same noise with all the different adapters I've used. Maybe there's some shielding issue inside of the system or something. But either way, the picture itself is beautiful. I was playing some Sega CD games on that CRT that I got from you.
Which one, Sewer Shark?
No, I was playing Shining Force CD. And it looks great, and it's nice. It's very nice. I got a Saturn cable from the same guy, and it did not turn out as well. It made my TV look like it was haunted. It was just this flickering dark red image of a Sega Saturn time set screen.
Poltergeist type situation.
Yeah.
I saw it. Yeah.
It was weird, but the guy's sending me some replacement cables, so it's fine.
That's good. I
also got a surround sound system for my television for the first time. Like I've experienced them at other people's houses, but this is the first one I've had myself. So I immediately set up my Series X to output in Dolby Surround, and then I set up my PS4 and my PS3, and everything that could support Dolby Surround is now in Dolby Surround. And it's weird because most games don't have a ton of support for surround until you get to cutscenes.
Right.
But anytime I'm playing Yakuza and just walking around Kamurocho or whatever, like occasionally I'll hear like if I throw a bicycle at somebody and then turn around real quick, I'll still hear the bicycle behind me, and that's really fucking weird. So I'm getting used to that, but it's neat. Also, I was playing some the Namco arrangement games on my arcade stick. They're so good. But I was just wanted an excuse to play my 8-bit arcade stick again.
Yes.
And I remembered that you had mentioned those Namco arcade arrangement games, and I was like, I fucking love those. So
Yes.
I immediately pulled those up and was playing some of those. And I was playing a ton of Rally X arrangement, which is not on the Namco Museum that includes those.
Nope.
And it makes me angry that it's not, because that's such a good one. Of those 6 arrangement games they made, that one is one of the more interesting.
Also, we got fucking Dig Dug arrangement on the collection, but not Xevious arrangement. I'd much rather Xevious than Dig Dug.
Granted, Xevious arrangement doesn't add a lot compared
True.
to some of the others.
But
it's
Xevious
still
is a better game than Dig Dug.
I would argue that.
I don't like Dig Dug. I've never liked Dig Dug.
I always love Dig Dug. Also,
first of all, it stresses me out. I don't like it.
Yeah, that's fair. I'll give you that. But he does look like a Smurf, and as a kid, I thought it was the Smurf game, and it was way better than the officially licensed Smurf.
Than the actual Smurf game, yeah.
Yeah. Also, one thing I just wanted to mention, because I've been playing so much Yakuza, so something about the series has suddenly started to amuse me the further I get in it, and it's entirely a language barrier thing, and I get that. It's because I don't speak Japanese. But because the game is all voiced in Japanese, and I'm just reading the translation, I'm starting to recognize some patterns in the Japanese vocalization. And the one that I have noticed most consistently, which is increasingly amusing me, is anytime somebody asks Kiryu a question where the answer is yes or okay or all right or that's good, it'll say that in the text at the bottom of the screen, but all that Kiryu says is, and I know that there's some sort of nuance to that I'm not picking up as a non-Japanese speaker.
Yeah. But
it just sounds like Date or whoever is like, Kiryu, does that sound good to you? And he just goes, and the more it happens, the more amused I am by it. So like now, anytime somebody's asking him a question that could have an affirmative answer, I'm bracing for it. I'm like, do it, do the and he's just like yes, thank you.
Yeah. I was playing Yakuza Like a Dragon in English, and I was in a very awkward date type scenario.
Yeah.
And my wife was like, I can't even listen to this. It's so awkward. And I was like, oh yeah, it's in English now, so you get to enjoy the awkwardness now too. Because it hadn't dawned on me. Like, she's listened to like 60 hours of Yakuza games, and then all of a sudden it's in English, and she doesn't know how awkward it can be anytime there's a female human in the scene.
Yeah.
And so that was it. She was like, I can't even listen to this. I have to leave the room. I was like, welcome to me since November.
Right.
Let's do some news.
Yes, sir.
First up, upcoming Ninja Gaiden Trilogy release uses the Sigma 1 and Sigma 2 versions of the game, as we previously talked about.
Right.
Because the source code for the originals was lost.
Good job, Tecmo.
How the fuck are all these companies losing source code that they made?
And you know, a lot of it from that era seems to have been lost, and that's less than 20 years ago.
It's strange.
The early 2000s, apparently all these Japanese developers were like, game's done, throw it in the trash.
Forget it. Move to a new office. Burn this one down.
Right? It was like Columbus. If they burn the old office down, they'll have to build a bridge to get back to society.
A second model of Evercade may be coming, which is exciting that it did well enough. It got okay reviews.
Yeah.
It didn't look amazing, but people were relatively happy with it.
I can't find anybody who will tell me what this new model entails in any way.
Yeah, I don't know where any of the information is coming from.
And why does it need a new model? You still get new cartridges for the old one, right? Just keep making more games. That was the point, wasn't it? They would just
shut
keep
up,
making...
Saturn, with your logic. And here's the Evercade 2.
Right.
Now with...
no support for the old cartridges.
Comes in blue. It's the Nintendo model of new systems. Right. Square Enix has temporarily removed Soul Reaver from Steam in order to work on a, quote, important update.
I hope that update includes functionality.
Yeah, because the game does not function in its current state on Steam and on GOG.
Right.
So it'd be really nice if they were just making the game that's been up for sale for years actually work.
Yeah, at least on any kind of modern system. Like on my machine, it'll run. I can run the game. It even kind of recognizes my controller a little, but it runs like butt.
Yeah, it'll technically run the same way that you can technically safely drink toilet water right out of the bowl, but you should not.
This is true. You should not.
Upcoming Switch game Androdunos 2 is also getting a physical release on 3DS and Dreamcast. That's a weird cross-section.
I think that'll make it the last officially licensed physical 3DS game.
Yep. Sega has been declared Metacritic's Publisher of the Year.
Good job, Sega.
Yep, jumped right over that very low bar. You made it.
I like that in all the articles that I've seen talking about this, they either show a picture of Yakuza Like a Dragon or they show a picture of Persona 4. Because that's apparently the only 2 games Sega put out last year.
Well, what fascinates me is that Sega is one of the most massive PC game publishers as well. They own the Total War franchise. That is massive.
I was reading about that this week. I was like, I remember that they didn't always own it because the first one was published by Activision, if I remember right. And I was trying to figure out how it happened. And apparently it was just Sega Europe wanted more PC footprint. So they got the okay to just buy that company.
Yeah. So cool. The bar was literally underground. All they had to do was walk near it, and they've succeeded.
They just had to keep breathing, and they managed it for a whole year.
Yeah. Just don't literally tell all your customers to fuck off, and you win.
Yeah.
Publisher of the Year. Yeah. Wow. You guys have phones, don't you? The PC port of Crash Bandicoot 4 included always online Battle.net based DRM. And was cracked within a day.
Well, then there's such a good thing that they put that DRM there. It protected the game's sales for almost a day.
It was useless and annoying.
Yeah. Once again, people who pirated the game had a better experience than the people who purchased the game.
Don't get me wrong, Sega's great, but it's shit like this why they got Publisher of the Year. Sega was just like, oh, what did we do this year? We put out functioning games.
We were not Activision again this
Publisher
year.
of the Year. Your shit works, and you charge normal amounts of money for it? Oh, my God. Miss Walker's Hironobu Sakaguchi says he's not interested in remastering Last Story or Blue Dragon and would prefer to work on new projects. I'm just going to say it, and I've said it before. Games that were originally in HD probably don't need to be remastered.
Well, Last Story was not in HD.
Was it not HD?
It was Wii.
Oh, I'm thinking of, what am I thinking of?
Lost Odyssey.
Lost Odyssey is what I'm thinking of. Last Story could probably use a remake. That probably looks pretty rough.
Yeah. It looks a little rough these days.
Bethesda is releasing a collection of classic Doom games physically on Switch. And by Bethesda, we mean Microsoft.
Right, now we mean Microsoft, yes.
Fuck you, ZeniMax. So that's cool.
Yeah.
I might get it just because I like Doom, but I already own all the games because I have Game Pass.
That's
so
true.
I get to play all of the Doom games except 2016. Why? Why?
It's still weird.
Sega, I can play Doom 64, but I can't play Doom 2016. You give me Doom 3.
Right.
Great. Sega, Publisher of the Year, Sega, sent a DMCA takedown request to SteamDB so they can't show download stats for Yakuza Like a Dragon. The reason everyone assumed was because on SteamDB it has a button that says install.
Right.
But that just takes you to the Steam page for it. But presumably some Sega lawyer was like, it's a piracy.
Yeah.
And
the thing is, all of Sega's other games are on SteamDB. But only that one got the DMCA takedown request.
But thankfully, Publisher of the Year, Sega, did do what no other publisher seems capable of doing and sent out a heartfelt apology and corrected the issue.
Right, yeah. And they did actually apologize. It was not just like, we undid it, get over it.
It wasn't like a Blizzard apology where they're like, we're sorry you got upset.
Right.
Are you going to undo any of the things you did? No. So there you go, Publisher of the Year for doing what you should do anyway.
Yeah, for acting like normal human beings.
CD Projekt Red updating The Witcher 3 for PS5 and Series X in, quote, second half of 2021. I don't think it's listed here, but they've also reportedly canceled their Cyberpunk multiplayer game that they were making.
Yeah,
I can't say I'm shocked at that one.
Yeah.
Axlay is the latest SNES game to get an SA1 patch, which I believe those are the patches that make it run not like butt.
That is correct.
Those are the ones.
It gives it some more RAM, I believe, which gives us some more speed.
They should just rename it to the non-butt patch. SGDQ 2021 will be held online in July.
I pay extra for the butt patch.
I'm trying to get off the butt, so I got to get the butt patch.
Yeah, exactly.
It keeps me so I don't crave butt all day.
Episode 300.
16 original Xbox and Xbox 360 games are on xCloud now.
Did you see what the lineup is?
No, I got excited that they did it and then never looked at it again.
So it's a bunch of Rare games and Bethesda games and a couple of Gears of War games and for some reason Double Dragon Neon.
Cool.
Yeah.
I like all of those things.
Right? It's just weird that the one not Microsoft-owned game in that list was Double Dragon Neon. Not a bad choice, I guess, but weird.
Yeah. Hamster/Konami have announced Arcade Archive's Haunted Castle for Switch. So you can play that.
Don't do that.
If you wanna.
Don't do that.
This one just it brings me so much joy to say the Analog Pocket has been delayed again until October.
Why does that bring you joy?
And granted, well, if anyone that has pre-ordered it or is excited about it, and you're bummed out, rightfully so, I feel for you, I do.
Right.
But I'm still frustrated at Analog and how they've communicated about the Pocket.
That's fair.
And I can't help but feel like they've been a little dishonest about their supply chain and their pre-order situation this whole time. It really feels like it.
I mean, granted, they could have had some impact because of COVID and all that.
Absolutely they did. The problem was they came out of the gate acting like everything was honky-dory, which is a phrase people still say in 2021. And then all of a sudden everyone was like, where the fuck? What it seemed like... Yeah. Is they came out and they're like, here's the new thing. And they knew there were shortages and production problems. And they were like, oh, well, but we'll iron that out. That'll all stop in a month or two.
Right.
And then it didn't. And now they're like, oh, fuck. So
I've noticed they haven't even started the pre-order process on the Duo yet.
No, they've not restocked anything. So again, let me be clear. I don't take pleasure in anyone who has had their pre-order delayed.
Right.
Sorry that's happened to you. That sucks. But I do feel like this is a little bit of comeuppance for Analog.
Fair.
Just throwing it all out there and then being dead silent forever about it.
That
like,
kinda,
give us some information,
right.
you know?
It sounds like
finally,
LRG. They're really good about just never getting information.
Yeah. LRG should just have a big block letters on their website that just says, it's gone. Doesn't matter what you're there for. It's gone. It's gone. It's gone. You didn't get it. It's gone.
But
Sorry.
I already paid for that pre-order.
Yeah, it's gone. If you're coming to the website, it's gone. If you're loading the website up like a chump instead of using some kind of stock bot to auto check out like everyone else does in 2021, it's gone. You're a chump. Get out.
Yeah.
PSN crashing on users trying to download PS3 games before servers go dark. Thanks, Sony.
Yep.
Sega Publisher of the Year.
I'm just saying that if the Saturn and the Dreamcast had beaten out the PlayStation and PlayStation 2, we wouldn't be reporting on the PS3 going dark.
This is true. I heard someone. I was watching a Dreamcast. I was watching an Atomic Wave video the other day, and the person doing it was talking about the Dreamcast, and they said that it was the most successful console launch in history to that point.
That's true.
And I had never heard that, and that is just fascinating to me how swiftly the PlayStation 2 kicked its fucking teeth in.
Oh, yeah.
It just fascinating. Anyway, that's totally unrelated to our topic, our episode 300 topic.
Yay!
We're doing Tetris.
What's that?
It's Tetris is it's that game that came with your Game Boy.
Oh, okay. I know that one.
Yeah, it's the one with the blocks. It's basically a Columns ripoff if you've played Columns.
Gross.
Just immediately upset. We're doing Tetris.
Yes.
And to be clear up front, as far as scope, it is impossible for us to cover every variant or even find every variant of Tetris or cover every piece of Tetris's history within a reasonable amount of time.
I mean, we could devote another 300 episodes to it.
Apparently, there's a docudrama coming to Apple TV Plus soon.
Yes.
I know Norman Caruso, the gaming historian, did a wonderful Tetris documentary.
Yes.
Hell, we've kind of, after a fashion, done a Tetris episode kind of built into our Tengen episode.
Right.
So it's just to be clear, this isn't everything. This is just
everything.
Your basic Tetris.
So we're covering everything.
And we covered a lot of Tetris Effect on our previous episodes.
Which that is not related to Tetris.
That's not
a Tetris game.
There are also going to be quite a few Russian names and words in this episode, and I want to tell you now that we cannot say them.
I can barely speak English.
So it should be clear that any names we mispronounce, sorry.
Yeah.
So we're sorry.
Sorry about
that. Release info. The original version was completed sometime in 1984 for the Electronica 60.
Yes.
Which was a computer system in Russia.
Correct.
The first public
in
version...
the Soviet Union.
Right, pardon me. Soviet Union. Yeah. The first public version was developed by Vadim Gerasimov for MS-DOS and was created in 1986 and made available only in the USSR.
Right.
And the first commercial version was released in Europe by Mirrorsoft in 1987.
Yes.
And now Saturn is going to tell us every single fine detail about the development and history of Tetris without missing anything or mispronouncing anything. Go.
Correct. So we're going to start at about 800 BC with the discovery of Tetraminos.
The discovery of the square.
It's
like a circle, but got more sides.
Brilliant. Less sides. You have Alexei Patanov. He was Alexei Pajitnov. I looked up possible correct pronunciations of things so that I could immediately forget them.
Yes.
So Alexei Pajitnov, he was working as a speech recognition researcher at the Soviet Academy of Sciences in the late 70s and the early 80s. And the machines they worked on were those Electronica 60s. And
which are very cool looking machines.
Yes.
Very cool looking screens.
Right. And while
it's very like nuclear test site looking screens on those.
Which granted, a lot of computers in the late 70s, early 80s looked like those in a business environment.
True.
So it was similar enough to things you would see in the West, but it had that distinctive Soviet flair. And while he was working there, he did develop a handful of small puzzle games for them to play on these computers in between work or in their downtime, or maybe while they were working. I don't know how productive they were. And
if Tetris was around, I can tell you how productive they were.
Right,
0% productive.
Right. And the inspiration for the game was childhood puzzles that he had with Pentaminos, the 5-block pieces.
Yes.
And during development, he decided to swap it out for Tetraminos because he felt the game was getting too overcomplicated too quickly with these 5-piece bricks. And the first version of the game that he presented to his colleagues didn't have any scoring or levels or anything like that, but he still noticed his coworkers becoming addicted to the game.
Right.
And a version of that version of the game was brought over to the Moscow Medical Institute, and they noticed a clear drop in productivity in the institute when Tetris arrived, and so they outright banned the game at the Moscow Medical Institute. So we do know exactly how it affected productivity.
Lots.
Yeah. His name Tetris was an amalgam of Tetra because it was Tetraminos and tennis because Tetris is obviously a tennis-based game.
Well, we can figure this out.
No,
the playing field is a rectangle, as is a tennis court.
Okay, yeah.
Tennis ball is round, which is a shape, and squares are shapes.
True, yes. Where's your racket?
It's got a shape going a direction, which happens in tennis.
No, the interview that I saw with him, he said that he just really liked tennis, and he thought it was a good name for a game. And
there you go.
He wanted his name to also be named like tennis, so it was Tetra Tennis. It's Tetris.
Perfect.
And in order to make the game more widely available, he hired a 16-year-old high school student named Vadim Gerasimov to port the game to MS-DOS. And the DOS version, which you can still find on archive.org, made by this 16-year-old kid in the Soviet Union, was the one that incorporated the scoring and the different colors and the high scoreboard and stuff like that.
Right.
And it was the version that later inspired every other version since then.
Right. And then it leaves
yes,
the USSR.
Right. So IP law, as we know it in the rest of the world, didn't exist in the USSR because of the way that their government was structured. So because of that, the researchers at the Academy of Sciences weren't allowed to sell their creations. They all belonged to the government, essentially. So Pajitnov transferred the rights to the game to the Academy so that they could work to export the game to other countries. And they kind of seeded it in Poland. They took that MS-DOS version and they gave it to some people in Poland to distribute out to others. And it made the rounds. People were excited about it. They played it. And finally, it lands in the hands of this guy, Robert Stein, who was an international salesman for a British company, Andromeda Software. And he reached out to Pajitnov and his manager at the Academy, who was Victor Brizhabrin. I'm not even going to pretend that's close to correct, and I apologize to him. Thank you. But he reached out to them to obtain the rights.
Brizhabrin?
I don't know.
But okay. Go ahead.
As somebody who does not speak Russian, there's not enough vowels in that for me to properly pronounce it, so I apologize.
There you go.
But he reached out to them to obtain the rights to the game, and he got back an excited fax from them saying, yes, they want to work with him.
I love the phrase "unexcited fax."
Yeah, it was.
Imagine the fax machine printing it out real high pitch, like.
Whoa, hold on. This was 1987. It took 8 minutes for it to print that fax out.
Oh yeah, I guess so. I'm just imagining an excited fax, and then we cut back, and it just says "okay" like in the middle of a page.
But it had an exclamation mark.
Yeah, the next page is an exclamation point. Just.
So Stein went to CES 1987, and he was trying to pitch the game there to any publisher he could find. And almost every publisher was like, no, we do not want to publish a Soviet game. There's all kinds of connotation and context there that we do not want to get involved in.
Right.
And finally, he found Mirrorsoft in Europe and Spectrum Holobyte in North America that were both willing to take a chance on this because of how good the game was. Mm-hmm. And so he immediately signed contracts to sell the rights to both of those companies. But it turns out that fax he got didn't give him any permissions. It just showed they were interested.
Right.
So he sold the rights. He didn't own them or anything. He just sold them.
Right.
And both Mirrorsoft and Spectrum Holobyte.
Well, it's like how I've been selling NFTs for all your collectibles that you own.
Exactly.
But I haven't asked you about it.
No, and nobody owns those but me. They just own the NFT for it.
Right.
Yeah. It's fine.
Saturn NFTs now available.
So the game was very successful in both Europe and in North America. And they only sold it for PCs at the time. MS-DOS was the first version, and then it was also ported to things like Spectrum and Commodore and all the other popular microcomputers of the mid to late 80s.
Right.
And it won several awards as well. The 1988 Software Publishers Association gave the game many awards. And as it was getting all this acclaim and all these sales, that's when Stein realized he never owned the rights to the game to distribute it. So he reached out to Elektronorgtechnika, which is commonly called ELORG. And that was the USSR's organization for importing and exporting computer software. And he got some back and forth with them, and finally he did get the rights. He got a 10-year contract for international publishing rights on all current and former computer systems. Current and future computer systems. So that covered what he had sold. So technically he is now in the right.
Right. After a fashion.
Yeah, eventually. He sorted it out. It's fine. It's fine now. But the thing is, I said computer systems, and that's where things start to get messy going forward. And and this is what we talked about way back on episode 9 of our show.
Before Norman Caruso.
True. This was
swooped in, stole our thunder.
Right. So, yeah, we covered it. It was covered.
Yeah, kind of ish. No, really go watch his documentary.
Yeah, watch his documentary. It's very authoritative. He does a very good job. So if you want to get more in depth on this. But the short version, the game obviously was doing incredibly well. And different countries wanted their own versions of the game. And among those, you have Hank Rogers from Bulletproof Software, who wanted to publish the game in Japan on home consoles. And so he contacted Spectrum Holobyte because his company was an American company. So he contacted the American publisher and he asked them for the rights, and they gave him the rights because sure, why not? They can do that now. Just
we have the rights.
Yeah,
clearly,
right.
We made the game,
right. And then Atari Games wanted to publish it in arcades. So they went to Mirrorsoft, the European publisher of the game, and got the rights from them. Nobody's contacted the Soviet Union at this point. Why do that? And then Sega wanted to publish the game in arcades in Japan, so they contacted Atari Games and got the rights from Atari, who'd gotten the rights from Mirrorsoft.
It's fascinating that this is how it works. It seems definitely not like how it works.
Right? And the Soviet organization Elorg, they had not been told about any of this. They had no idea any of this was happening. The game was being released in arcades. It was being released on Famicom. It was being ported all over the place, and Elorg had no idea. They knew that there was a DOS port somewhere in the world, not in the Soviet Union.
Right.
And Nintendo saw this as an opportunity. They were developing the Game Boy. It was coming soon, and Hiroshi Yamauchi, the then president of Nintendo, he wanted it. He wanted this for the Game Boy. So he went to Rogers, who had published the Famicom version, and asked to obtain the rights. So now Nintendo was trying to get the rights from Bulletproof Software, who got the rights from Spectrum Holobyte, who got the rights from Stein, who got the rights from the Soviets.
But previously via a fax from some dudes.
Right. A very excited fax.
The fax heard around the world.
That rolled all this in motion.
Just says, sure. I got the rights right here. It's a piece of dot matrix printer paper that says all right.
Yeah. It says, we are interested. He got back a fax and just said,
So, hey, can we publish Tetris? Okay, we're going to go publish it over here.
Thanks, Kiryu. So you have, at this point, Hank Rogers trying to get the rights for Nintendo for the game. He flies to the Soviet Union because he is starting to realize that there is a problem here.
Yeah.
Because he had tried to contact Atari Games. He had tried to go directly to Stein. Everybody is a little wishy-washy about when they can give the rights. So he just decides to go directly to the Soviet Union. He goes to Elorg. And on the day he arrives, Stein also happens to be there. And also a manager from Mirrorsoft also happened to be there. They both had appointments. Rogers did not have an appointment. He just showed up, and he showed up before them, so he got in first.
Right.
And
that's not how appointments work. What the hell?
Right. So he spoke to Nikolai Belikov, who was the president of Elorg, and he got permission for Nintendo to make a handheld version. And in his pitch, he showed them the Famicom cartridge that he had already made, and they were like, well, we didn't authorize that.
Oh, no.
And fortunately, he explained the situation, and in the process, he became friends with Alexei Pajitnov, and Pajitnov was pitching for Rogers this whole time, and for by extension for Nintendo.
Right.
And eventually, Belikov clarified the contract to everyone else to say, hey, that previous contract for computers meant a machine with a screen and a keyboard. That is it. You did not have the rights for any of the rest of that. So suddenly...
So in that Apple ad, what is a computer? Yeah. We now know it's a machine with a screen and keyboard.
Exactly. That's why that kid didn't know. So...
She needed Elorg to clear it up for her.
Clearly.
What's a computer? Well, according to Elorg, in the Tetris dispute of the late 80s.
Yeah. So, ultimately, Elorg signed an exclusive deal with Nintendo for all handheld and console versions of the game. And Atari Games, who were incensed by this, and we've covered this whole mess, but they decided that the NES was a computer because it says family computer right in the name.
Yeah.
And they sold that basic kit that came with a keyboard.
True.
So it's pretty much it.
But according to Elorg, it has to have a screen, and there's no screen on a Nintendo.
There was no screen on the Nintendo.
Got him.
Yep. So yeah, there was that.
But the Game & Watch is a computer.
Yeah.
We've just, so
as long as it has a keyboard. When they released that keyboard attachment for the Game Boy, it became a computer.
Yes. Then now it's a computer.
And despite all of the mess between Nintendo and Atari Games doing business as Tengen, Sega also planned to release their port on the Genesis, just a port of their arcade version. But then they saw all that mess with Nintendo and Atari games, and they're like, nope, we're not going to do that. And
they're like, I don't want that kind of mess for future Publisher of the Year, Sega. Fuck that.
Apparently 10 copies of the Mega Drive version were produced in Japan. They are incredibly rare and
I imagine
not as valuable as you think because they don't have the bubble that we have over here. But they are still very valuable.
I've played that version of Tetris. It's not very good.
It's okay.
It's not very bad, but it's not very good.
And a different Mega Drive port of their arcade version was then released on the Genesis Mini last year. So that's cool too. Or 2 years ago now. Damn. And because of all of that, as that mess happened, Pajitnov eventually immigrated from the Soviet Union to the West after seeing how things worked in other countries and the fame that people were getting from all this and the recognition the game was getting. So he moved to the U.S. He moved to the Seattle area. And he started working for Spectrum Holobyte, who was that company that had licensed the game in the U.S. He had never been paid at all for Tetris up to that point. This was in 1991.
What a trooper, man.
Post the release of the Game Boy, he'd never seen a dime from Tetris. So he started making games for Spectrum Holobyte that would totally make him money, like Hatris.
Yeah, we're talking about Hatris.
Yeah. So in April of 96, the Academy reverted all rights to Tetris back to Pajitnov. They didn't have to. They did, which was incredibly kind of them. This was, of course, well after the fall of the Soviet Union. And Pajitnov in Seattle got together with his friend Hank Rogers that he had met through the whole mess with Nintendo, and they formed the Tetris Company, which still owns the rights to Tetris today. That was back in June of 96 that they properly formed it. And the objective of the company was just to license Tetris to other people, to publish it on other platforms, to make variants of it. And they finally got the very last rights of the game from Elorg in 2002. For those 6 years, they still had to co-credit Elorg for everything.
Yeah.
And by the time that they had founded the Tetris Company, some of the license holders, Nintendo, were publishing these quote original Tetris games that had nothing to do with Tetris, like Tetris Attack we mentioned earlier. Tetris 2 was another one that they were not real pleased with because it was not very Tetris-y.
Yeah.
And Rogers was very vocal about not enjoying the fact that those games had a Tetris name on them. And so going forward, the Tetris Company became very protective of the Tetris name, which is why since then, games called Tetris tend to play like Tetris.
Unless you're on mobile.
Yeah, or on Tetrisphere.
Yeah, or in Tetrisphere.
But no, even the mobile games still play like Tetris, even if they are touchscreen and weird. They still use tetraminos and they still form lines.
True.
So it still follows the functional rules of Tetris.
Well, that's just the development of the game.
Yes.
Let's talk about the sound.
There's sound in Tetris.
The Tetris theme
is
actually a 19th century Russian folk song known as Korobeniki that tells the story of a meeting between a peddler and a girl describing their haggling over goods in a metaphor for courtship.
And the song was originally in the 19th century.
$1. No, $2. You want to go out? The song was originally based on a poem by Nikolai Nekrasov, who played a role in the publication of Dostoevsky's first novel. He was a very well-known poet.
Yeah.
Korobayaniki, as arranged by Hip Tanaka, was first used as a musical piece in Tetris in Nintendo's 1989 Game Boy port.
Yeah.
Prior versions of Tetris used various traditional Russian music or, quote, Russian-sounding music.
And yeah, some of that Russian-sounding music, especially on the Atari versions of the game, is weird. It's neat and kind of catchy, but weird.
The NES version of the game includes an arrangement of Dance of the Sugar Plum Fairy from the second act of the Nutcracker. Nutclacks. It's the sequel to Clacks, which is a famous ballet composed by Tchaikovsky. The other two songs on the NES version were Hip Tanaka.
It sounded like you were saying Clacks was a famous ballet.
Clacks is a famous ballet by Tchaikovsky. You may know of the famous Clacks-based ballet.
It is the 90s. There is time for ballet.
There was time for Clacks. There was time now.
There's never been time for Clacks since then, I assure you.
I certainly haven't had time
Right.
for it. I'm just saying. Not much to say graphically. It's Tetris. It represents squares.
Right.
Anything that can represent squares and movement can feasibly display Tetris, and has displayed Tetris.
And when you look at like the very earliest versions of Tetris that are basically just ASCII art, essentially, it still conveys the game well. It doesn't detract from it at all, seeing those earliest graphics.
Which is why it was Yamauchi demanding the game so heavily. Really was insightful, because it's a game that works totally fine in black and white on a low-powered system like the Game Boy. But let's talk gameplay. There are Tetraminos in Tetris. There are 7 blocks
what are their
referred
names?
to as Tetraminos. There's T and Z and S and L.
Right.
And a backward L.
J.
And yeah, there you go, J. I went to college. Backward L.
Yeah.
That's a J. Okay, if you say so.
An O and I. That's all 7.
And for people that don't know the basic concept of Tetris, I'm going to explain it to you.
Okay.
You drop blocks to create solid rows. Yes. Every time a row is filled in completely, it is removed and scored.
Right.
As rows are cleared, the blocks move down, but otherwise blocks will float, meaning they do not drop to fill gaps, because if they did, then the whole game would solve itself immediately.
I actually, when reading about the development, Pajitnov said that the earliest builds of the game did not clear the lines that you completed. You just,
oh, really?
It just highlighted them. And the objective was just see how many of the lines you would have highlighted by the time you eventually reached the top of the screen.
So the answer was 0, between 0 and how many rows there were.
Right. So he quickly realized that did not tend to make a very long game, so he eventually made them go away.
Removing more rows with a single block drop scores higher points, up to a total of 4 lines being cleared at once, which is called a Tetris.
Yep.
Which, in case you didn't know, that's what a Tetris is.
Yeah, it's tennis.
It's basically tennis. Just imagine tennis. Now stop imagining it and imagine something totally different. That's Tetris. Let's talk drops. Dropping. There's a soft drop in Tetris. Many versions of Tetris, a player can hold a button to speed up the descent of a block to release it, and release it to return it to normal speed. This is called a soft drop. It's useful for quickly getting a block near where it's supposed to go and then carefully sliding it into place.
And in the early Nintendo versions, that was the only way to accelerate the speed of the blocks.
Yes. Most versions include a hard drop.
Yes.
Including many of the early PC versions.
Right.
A hard drop is whenever you have a button that instantly drops the block all the way to the bottom of the screen. Yep. It's useful for maintaining speed and moving ahead of opponents in multiplayer matches. Tetris Effect even rates players in how many actions they perform. Yeah. Because Tetris has very much become a competitive thing over the years. And a lot of Tetris scoring and ideology is based around that competitiveness.
Which we can really thank Atari games for. I think their arcade version was the first multiplayer version of Tetris.
Yep. And then you have spins. You have what's referred to alternatingly as easy and infinite spin. Starting in the next Tetris in 1999, blocks would pause briefly whenever spun, so players could effectively infinitely spin blocks in place after they had fallen to keep sliding them back and forth. And initially, people were very upset about this. And in a lot of reviews for Tetris Worlds, people shit all over it because there was infinite spin. And they're like, it breaks the game. It's so easy now.
Right.
But in retrospect, if you're playing the game competitively, then or multiplayer, that doesn't gain you anything because you're not performing any actions.
Right.
You're just sitting there you've effectively paused your game while your opponent is still doing things. So in the long run, it didn't really affect the game that much. And I've seen different variants. Some games I've played, they'll let you spin a little bit.
Right.
And then some of them let you do it for forever.
Yeah.
Eventually, the Tetris company would adopt the infinite spin as part of the base Tetris design.
Yeah. Which I appreciate.
Yes. Yeah, as a bad Tetris player, whenever I don't have my easy spin, I get upset.
Right.
Advanced concepts, you have the T-spin, which is kind of really the only advanced concept in Tetris. Now, there's a lot of variation of the T-spin, a lot of details. There's T-spins, mini T-spins, a lot of different scoring for it that we won't totally get into. But the T-spin is when a T-shaped block falls into a spot where it cannot move left, right, or up, but can be spun into place. Scoring is generally based on how many lines it clears, and many games have many different variations on how they recognize and reward T-spins. So they've very much become a part of Tetris design, and they really are kind of the only real advanced block maneuver. I mean, everything else is kind of ideological, like making wells and leaving yourself openings and stuff. The T-spin is the only real advanced maneuver in Tetris.
And the only time I ever see it is when it's an accident.
I do it on accident too. I always have to Google the picture of the T-spin shapes and be like, okay, I'm going to make one of those. And then we also have the Tetris effect, which isn't gameplay, but it's a byproduct of gameplay.
Yeah.
And there has been some research on how Tetris actually affects our brains, and it has been researched by Harvard psychologist Robert Stickgold, wherein they studied the effect of people's sleep, people with insomnia, after playing lots and lots of Tetris.
Yeah.
And the idea is that in practice, the Tetris effect is thought to be a similar phenomenon to that of feeling like you're on a boat or a roller coaster after experiencing those things. It's the idea that you visualize or expect to see blocks falling in real life.
I've absolutely experienced that.
I've also seen it described in the same documents as seeing things and mentally trying to organize them like Tetris blocks. I can even move this over there, move that over there. Now, this has been expanded. I've not heard of this. Has been expanded into the concept known as game transfer phenomenon, which is basically how continued interaction with digital simulations changes our sensory perceptions in real life. So it's the same idea as the Tetris effect, but extrapolated out to everything, every game.
Yeah.
So things like imagining a mini map while you're driving, or mentally solving physical obstacles in game terms.
I have a mini map when I'm driving. It's on my phone.
Yeah, it's called Google Maps.
Right? It's right there.
The term was coined and continues to be researched by Angelica B. Ortiz de Gortari.
That's really neat.
And it's a lot of interesting work as people. So the idea, and there's a lot of terminology that I don't understand because I'm a big old dum-dum. But basically, it's this weird mixture of the mechanical portion of your brain interacting with the other portions of your brain, if I understand it correctly.
Yeah.
And it's really fascinating for them to see that because, games are interactive and they interact with certain portions of our brain that things like movies and music and stuff don't interact with.
Right.
And this is kind of a weird byproduct of our brains learning these actions and expecting things based on actions we've performed.
Yeah, I was going to say that it definitely applies to most falling block puzzle games, but as you describe that, I can think of other things from other games that I have found myself almost expecting. If I've been playing a game way too much, then when I go back out into the real world and realize that I can't actually jump on top of that building right now, it does, you have to remind yourself of that sometimes.
I get it with car driving games. I get in the car and I'm driving and I'm immediately like, why aren't I going 250 miles an hour through an
Right.
open field? And I'm like, all right, that's not how cars really
Yeah.
work.
This is reality. That would be a bad idea.
There were other Tetris games, and for people that don't know, that there is what is kind of referred to as the Tris series.
Yes. Well,
which
it was those other games that Pajitnov made for Spectrum Holobyte.
Right. But it seems like, as far as Pajitnov is concerned, this is his series of Tris games. And there were 4 of them. There were Tetris. There was Well Tris, which was basically Tetris, but in a well.
Yeah.
It's kind of 3D-ish.
Right.
There was Hat Tris, which was...
Hats.
Hats.
Yeah.
And there was... This one's called Faces... Tris 3. And it's the 4th game.
Yes.
In a weird Rambo type naming situation. And the ellipses are part of the name. It's called Faces Tris 3. I don't know. And it's fucking weird.
Yeah, maybe they thought that those 3 were the new Tris series.
Yeah, I don't know. But the official Tris series is Tetris, Weltris, Hatris, Faces Tris 3. Another notable variant that I played on stream and really enjoyed was Word Tris.
Now, my question is, why hasn't the Tetris company purchased the rights to any of those?
I don't know. I don't think they want them. Have you played them?
I did, and they're awful.
Weltris is interesting, but bad. Hatris is just bad. Faces Tris is fucking weird. So it drops slices of famous people's faces, like Gorbachev's face coming down, and you have to stack them with the right other parts of their face to make their faces. And really, Hatris and Faces Tris 3 all feel they both feel very they feel more columns-y than they do Tetris-y.
Yeah, I can see that.
Word Tris is really fun.
Yeah.
Doesn't feel much like Tetris, but it's fun. It's a good time.
Yeah, I remember us renting Hatris on NES, and it was not good.
Yeah, it's. Yeah, I don't know that I'd recommend. I would recommend Word Tris. If you like word games, Word Tris is fun.
It's neat.
It's a good time. Popular variants. Guinness World Records recognized Tetris as the most ported video game in history, having appeared on 65 different platforms, and that's as of 11 years ago.
Yeah, so we're not going to cover all of the ports of Tetris. So this is just some of the more notable ones that you should probably be aware of.
You have Sega Tetris, which was in the arcade and for some reason not called Sega Tris, is the first arcade version of Tetris. We talked about it earlier. Only released officially in Japan. It was the port of it was on the Genesis Mini.
Right.
You can play it. It's okay.
Yeah, it's fine.
Not the worst.
Yeah.
Atari Games Tetris, also in the arcade. We played this one, didn't we?
We did. I was upside down.
Yes, because it was the cocktail version.
Yes.
This released in North American arcades in 1989. Atari Games also obviously ported this one to the Tengen label on the NES.
Right.
This was part of that big fiasco.
Yes.
You have what is probably the most well-known version of Tetris, which is Nintendo Tetris.
Right.
Which is on the NES and the Game Boy. You've also got Tetris DS and Tetris 99, which are the other Nintendo Tetrises.
Right.
Tetris DS was notable because it was multiple Tetris game styles on one cart and had some really cool modes that I've not seen in any other Tetris game since or before.
My favorite was the push mode, where you...
Oh, was that the one where it was basically a shmup, but with Tetris blocks slamming into you?
No. You and your opponent shared a well, and there would be a couple blocks in the middle already, and so you could place pieces on those couple blocks that were in the middle, but if you didn't miss anything, it would just fall off the top of your opponent's screen. And every time you made a line, it would push whatever stack was in the middle closer to the opponent. Yeah. And if they made a line, it would push it back closer to you. So the two of you are trying to fill in enough, but not so much that you both leave a gap in the same place, because then you'll just never make a line. So, and if you make a mistake, that suddenly makes a massive well for the other player to play with. It's a blast. It's a ridiculous, fun multiplayer mode.
Tetris DS was until very recently my recommended version of Tetris.
Same.
I would always say, if you want to play Tetris DS.
And it's still one of my top 3 versions of Tetris.
I think more time needs to pass for me for some of the other versions of Tetris that I've played. Because I like a lot of different versions. But Tetris DS is hands down an easy recommendation.
Oh, yeah, it's great.
I think given time, I might prefer it to Tetris Effect, but right now I really love Tetris Effect.
Yeah, it's pretty great.
Tetris 99 is their most recent. It was developed by Eureka, who also developed Tetris the Grandmaster. And it's Tetris, but you're playing against a bunch of other people.
98 other people.
Then you have Tetris the Grandmaster series, which, again, developed by Eureka, based on the gameplay of Sega's earlier arcade games. And I didn't know this, but you were informing me it was known for being extremely difficult and fast and was kind of the go-to competitive version of Tetris.
Yeah, for quite a while there. It's
for a long time.
Just a rush to see who gets to level 200 the fastest. And there was a handful of them, and watching tournament level play of Tetris the Grandmaster, it just makes me dizzy. It's crazy fast. But there was a few of them. They released between 98 and 2000 in Japanese arcades, and then they did also make an Xbox 360 port in Japan in 2005. There was talk of a fourth one, and then they lost the rights to the Tetris franchise, and then they were going to release it anyway, but just call it the Grandmaster and pretend it wasn't a Tetris game.
Seems like a bad idea.
And then they couldn't find a publisher for that, and so
you don't say. You couldn't find a publisher for your ripped-off game.
Right.
Although it didn't stop all those people that were publishing things based off of a guy that had a fax that saw a thing and said something to this guy. So
it's not stopped Tetris in the past.
Yeah.
So it's in limbo now whether or not there will ever be another one. And since they did get some success with Tetris 99, maybe that will rejuvenate that effort. But I wouldn't necessarily hold your breath for the fourth one.
Yeah. Then you have Tetris Effect, which is, I think, the most recent standalone version of Tetris. Obviously, Puyo Puyo Tetris 2 has come out since Tetris Effect.
There's also the new mobile version.
Oh, God. Well, yeah, but that's mobile. Stop it.
And it's attached to the Tetris game show.
I'm sorry, the what?
Yeah, they made a Tetris game show attached to their new mobile game, and you can compete in it by playing Tetris on the mobile app, and it can win you real prizes.
Stop!
Yeah, they even have a game show host that presents it to you in the middle of the app.
We talked about the Tetris Effect quite a bit. We both very much enjoy it.
Yes.
It comes highly recommended. I own it on 3 platforms at this point.
Yeah. And also it has a lot of allusions to the older games. So the retro mode on the new Xbox and PC version emulates the NES style as far as multiplayer. Then you also have sound effects in the various co-op modes that just straight up borrow sound effects from the older versions. It borrows from Sega's arcade game. It borrows from Eureka's Grandmaster games. It'll borrow from Nintendo's version of the game. And I love that personally. I love that audio throwback to the older versions. That's really neat to me.
And then obviously Tetris founded the falling block puzzle genre.
Right.
Were there falling block puzzle games before Tetris? Maybe.
Yeah, maybe. Who knows?
I can't find any.
Right.
It was incredibly popular through the 90s. It was kind of overlapped by the match 3 genre of puzzle games that have kind of come out in the mid 2000s and then were super popularized by mobile phones.
Right.
Notable examples: you have Dr. Mario, Columns, Puyo Puyo, Clax, Super Puzzle Fighter 2 Turbo, Meteos, Luminace. There's so many falling block puzzle games that really would not probably exist without Tetris
and Hatris.
And Hatris and Faces Tris 3. All the puzzle games.
The puzzles.
Let's talk reception.
Yeah.
Tetris was like you were saying, from very early on, extremely highly praised.
Yes.
It was almost universally praised from everything I could find. Macworld Magazine, Dragon Magazine, Compute Magazine, CVG, everyone gave the game just glowing reviews across every platform and release that they saw it on.
Oh, yeah.
I feel like I didn't start seeing bad Tetris reviews until like N64 and forward when they started releasing weird shit.
Yep.
Because and those were poorly reviewed because they were usually weird. And then again, Tetris Worlds on PS2 and GameCube and Xbox.
Yeah.
There was controversy around that because that's when the infinite spin became like a thing.
Yeah, I specifically remember the GBA version of Tetris Worlds. The reviews were saying it's fine, but your GBA can play older versions of Tetris that are better.
Yeah. Tetris on Game Boy is thought to have been a major driving force in the system's success and sales. Right. What I find interesting is that the first few months of Game Boy Tetris being on the market, it dominated the sales charts, which is weird because most early Game Boys came with the game.
Yeah.
And for your so I'm assuming they counted pack-in sales on that?
They had to have. They had.
Yeah.
I don't believe it came with the console in Japan, though.
That's true. And it didn't come in America for all releases of the Game Boy. Even early on, I think there were some that did not include Tetris.
I think the initial release included Tetris, and eventually it stopped coming with the system. But yeah.
But, this was a pack-in game that was dominating sales charts.
Yeah.
And it was because if you had a Game Boy, you had to have Tetris.
Yeah. Pretty much.
And I remember growing up, I was upset because I had a Game Boy, and I'm pretty sure I had Tetris 2 on it. Was there a Game Boy port of Tetris 2?
There was, yeah.
I had that.
Gross.
It was bad. My Game Boy was Mega Man 2, Tetris 2, and Battletoads. Oh, and Balloon Kid. Those are all my Game Boy games.
I would have played Balloon Kid.
I played a lot of Balloon Kid.
That's all right.
Alexei Pajitnov praised the Game Boy version of the game as being very similar to his original design. And Famitsu, famous overscorer of video games, gave Tetris a 26 out of 40.
Well, hold on. This was the NES era. They were not an overscorer of video games back then.
Okay. They're just like Japanese IGN today. Everything's like 38 out of 40, everything that comes out.
Back then, it was very difficult to get close to a perfect score. I remember like in the mid-90s reading reviews in American magazines where they were like, this is good because Famitsu scored at a 31. So
interesting.
It was
they're pretty harsh on Tetris.
Yeah, they were pretty harsh on Tetris.
As of January 2010, the game sold.
Was that the Famicom or the Game Boy version of Tetris?
I'm not sure because usually what I do when I quote reviews is I go find the magazine and read it. I can't get Famitsu.
Yeah, it's hard to find.
So I don't know.
Because the Famicom port of Tetris isn't that great. Like, it's okay, but it's not great. The NES versions, both of them, were better. And they also made a huge splash, just like the Game Boy version later did.
As of January 2010, the game has sold over 170 million copies worldwide.
That was 11 years ago.
Yes. And as of December 2011, more than 132 million mobile copies of the game had sold. These numbers are a decade old.
Yeah.
And Tetris is
still selling.
It's still selling.
Yeah.
And possibly bigger than it's ever been.
Yeah.
So it's yeah. As far as legacy, the Tetris epic sci-fi trilogy seems to have dissipated.
No,
not entirely. But no one's been talking about it.
Yeah, it's pretty much
because for a while there was this people were like, we're gonna make a Tetris movie, and they're like, how? And then someone would be like, well, they made a Battleship movie, and they did. For anyone that forgot, they made a Battleship movie. Yeah. But there is the Apple TV docudrama coming about the rights issues with Tetris, so that should be interesting.
Yeah, that'll be weird.
And as far as final thoughts, and it kind of partially relating to legacy, I mean, Tetris is a full-on institution. Yeah. It has had such a massive impact on not just the industry and pop culture, but I would say that it wouldn't sound obscene to me if a historian drew enough lines to say that it potentially helped stabilize relations with the Soviet Union.
Yeah, I don't know if it deserves all that, but it definitely contributed.
Yeah, and it feels weird even trying to quantify any of it or any of its influence, other than to just say, well, it's Tetris. What do you mean? It's Tetris. If you don't like it, you already know you don't like it. If you do like it, you know you like it. And it's on everything, everywhere, and always sells, always.
Yeah.
So it's gargantuan.
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
it's massive.
And even though there have been some evolutions to the gameplay over the last 30 plus years, it's still close enough to those earliest versions that, like you were saying on the stream the other day, that even those early DOS versions aren't unplayable by any means.
No, absolutely not.
So it still holds up.
Yeah, it's fascinating how close to its original formula it has remained.
Yes.
And granted, adding things like easy spin and T-spin scoring things, they do change a lot.
Yeah, we forgot to mention that eventually they added hold pieces. That became a big deal.
We didn't even talk about the hold piece. Holy crap. That's another massive change.
Yeah, the first time I remember seeing that was on the new Tetris on N64. And I just, that blew my damn mind open.
What was I looking at? I was looking at that N64 game, Wave Tris. Was that it? Was that what it was called on N64? And they never acknowledged that it was supposed to be related to Tetris in any way, so I couldn't include it in this episode, but I tried.
Certainly not related.
I tried real hard. So anyway, it's Tetris. Tetris is enormous.
Yeah.
It's one of those wonderful games that's both casual and hardcore all at the same time.
Right.
It has massive competitive communities that are active and have been active for many years, worldwide competitions, world champions, and then it's also the game that your grandma will play on her phone.
Right. Yeah, I distinctly remember when NES Tetris came around. When we got it, like we took turns as a family playing it because it was weird and new and interesting. Yeah. And one of my sister's friends came over who had already played it on PC a year or two earlier. And she immediately got to like level 11 or 12 in one playthrough, and we were all crashing out at like 20 something lines. And we were all just like in awe, staring at her on the screen, like, how are you doing all of that? And it was captivating, even at that early era, to see high level Tetris play.
Oh yeah, and Tetris is it's fascinating because again, it's so many things to so many people. Yeah. For me, Tetris has always been this personal cathartic experience. Yeah. It's a thing that I play to relax, even when I'm like at breakneck speeds. It's still relaxing to me. And
I enjoy the competitive aspect. I prefer single player Tetris, but I do enjoy it even competitively.
I enjoy the competitive modes that are like dumb and have dumb weird power-ups. Those are fun.
Did you ever play New Tetris on N64?
No.
So it had this thing in the multiplayer where you could form 4x4 bricks if you placed your pieces in such a way that the four of them, or all the pieces you placed, were fully contained within 4x4 pieces. Yeah. And it would form this giant brick of either silver or gold, depending on if it was different pieces or four of the same piece. And then if you cleared a line including part of that brick, or better, cleared a Tetris including all of it, instead of it sending one line at your opponent, it would send 2 or 4 times that many lines at your opponent. And it made the multiplayer just absolutely ludicrous and unbalanced and unfair and hilarious. And
it's unfortunate we don't have enough time, not only on the show, but in our general lives to play, document, and discuss all of the wonderful multiplayer Tetris variants.
Oh, yeah.
Because there are so many, and some of them are so much fun.
Oh, yeah.
But anyway, that's our episode 300.
Real quick, which versions of Tetris do you recommend first to people?
Just any that you have access to. Honestly, really honestly, if you're like, hey, I really want to get the best Tetris experience, Tetris DS and the Tetris Effect. Those are the two that I'm like, these are my preferred versions of Tetris. But really, if you just got an old Game Boy lying around and you can get a copy of Tetris for a couple bucks, that's just as good. Yeah. And that's the beauty of it.
As good as some of those versions of Tetris are, I've poured just as many hours into that little tiny Tetris keychain as I have.
They just re-released that tiny Tetris keychain, and I got mine, and it's still fun.
Yeah. It's crazy how something that simple as a keychain can still have the same impact as these newer versions.
Yep. I play it when I'm laying in my hammock outside.
Nice.
Because I don't want to take my fancy video games out in the hammock. So drop them, they'll get dirty.
It's hammock time.
Anyway, thank you for listening for 300 episodes.
Yeah.
Man,
and
that's a lot.
If you're just joining us and you appreciated this, there's another 299 episodes you can look at.
There's actually more than 291.
That's true.
Because we did some mini episodes and some bonus episodes and stuff.
Count.
We've got 80 episodes of Talking Wizards you can go listen to.
Dang.
We have probably at least 100 hours, probably more than that, of just uncut content that you can hear on the uncut versions of the show, accrued. And thankfully it's at the beginning, so if it's an episode you've already listened to, you can just listen to until you hit the parts that you've already heard.
Right, and then just peace out.
And thank you everyone for listening. Saturn, I want to thank you for doing 300 of these with me.
Oh shit, did I do that?
Just sacrificing at least 400 or 500 hours of your life. Our producer Guy for working with us on the show and being a part of things, and Pablo for editing everything, and Andrew for talking to me about dumb shit on Talking Wizards.
Yeah, and of course, thank you for convincing me to sit around and talk about video games for an hour or two a week. Like I wouldn't have done that already.
It's the biggest and longest running thing I've ever done in my life. And as long as I don't stop it, then it'll still be bigger and longer running than my actual human child.
Your marriage has lasted longer than this.
Oh, that's true. My marriage is longer.
Yes.
My marriage is longer. No, actually not my marriage.
No, your marriage is longer than this.
It's pretty close.
Yeah, it's pretty close.
I think I got married right before we started doing the show.
Yeah, because your kid was born a few months into us doing the show.
Yes, because I was married for barely a year before we had a kid.
Yeah, so technically your marriage has outlasted this show, but other than that,
it is now almost double the amount of episodes of the longest running podcast I ever did before this.
Man. And that other one felt like it lasted forever, too.
It did. We did 168 of those.
Man. How many of them were good?
None. That's why they're not available. But, yeah. Anyway, thank you all so much for listening, for being a part of this. If you would like to contribute to our Patreon, you can. If you'd like to chat with us in Discord, you can. If you'd like to leave us a review on iTunes, you can. You better.
That sounded like a threat.
Yeah. Well, I'm not saying it's not a threat, but I'm not saying it's a threat. I don't know. Maybe something will happen if you don't. I don't know. Do you want to find out? Anyway, thanks so much for listening. We'll be back next week. And as always, let us cling together.
Wait, hold on.
What?
We haven't done thank yous yet.
Oh, we haven't. Oh, goodness gracious. Got so caught up in thanking everybody.
Right? You thanked everyone.
I didn't want to thank the specific people.
Yeah, our excellent patrons who also deserve thanks.
Yes, we do need to thank the following patrons for making this specific episode possible, starting with James Myers.
And James Taylor.
Michael Castro.
Harry Pry.
Neil Hayes.
Carl.
The Butt Witch.
Bubsy Tramp Stamp.
And Steve Duke.
Yes.
Are all our wonderful patrons that make this show possible.
Yes.
And I'm going to go to bed now. So thank you so much for listening. We'll be back next week. And as always, let us cling together.